because Wilcom likes that. So hello guys, this is EmbroideryStudio E3 Beginners, fortunately you don't have a beginner who's here teaching the class. So my name is Terry Marchand. I've been digitizing, like I jokingly said earlier, since Moses walked the earth, but it's really only been about 22 years. I've been digitizing with Wilcom since they were still a DOS-based program, and I've started beta testing for Wilcom just as they entered into the Windows 95 arena with their Windows-based program. So I have a little bit of experience in using this program and in knowing how to break it. But the beauty is that it's hard to break. So one thing I always tell everybody when I do any of these classes, especially if you're brand new, don't be afraid to try something and see if it works. If you crash the program, hey, just restart it. You can't break it. It's if you're doing something that it can't calculate, it'll let you know in one way or another that it can't figure that out. But you can't break it. So don't ever feel afraid to try something just to see if it works. And if it works in the program and it sews out well, hey, then I think you've just solved yet another problem. I also want to say before we even get started that there are many solutions to any problem that you encounter when you're digitizing something. So the solutions that I come up with in a class when I'm telling you, do this, do this, do this, that's just one way of doing it. It's not the be-all, end-all, and I don't ever want anybody to think that they can't figure out a better way to do things. Because as you digitize, you're going to maybe find something that works more efficiently or that works better for you, the way you work. And there's no reason why you shouldn't do that. And it doesn't matter what that is, as long as it is technically sound and it sews out clean without any problems. But there's no reason why it shouldn't work. So let's get started. So this is our opening screen. I'm assuming everybody can see my screen okay. If you can't, raise your hand, and I'll see what I can what I'm doing wrong here. Oh, my questions thing just disappeared. That's not fun. Bear with me, experiencing technical difficulties. I need to pop something back on here. Cool. Sorry. Okay, we're cool. Does anybody have any questions before we start? We're good? Okay. So let's go ahead and let me get going here. So we have oh, I have a question here. Can I make a custom template? Yes, we can. I'll get into that in a minute, how we do that. So bear with me, and we'll get there. So when we start a design, when we first open the program, it opens up a blank design, which we can then, it opens up in the new template, the normal template, which is just standard stuff, the default stuff that's in here. Now you can, in fact, let's answer that question right away, shall we? So anything that you set here when it comes to object properties, when it comes to, like in this case, tatami stitches or satin stitches, you can set whatever properties you want in any of these fields, any one of these fields. So what stitch you want to start with, satin stitch, any of your object properties, what colors you want to start with, anything. Set that the way you want, and you can go File, Save As, and notice this is going to be a blank design right at the moment, mind you. Scroll all the way down to the bottom of this list to EMB template, and you want to name it as the normal template. Click Save. It'll overwrite that template. So every time you open up a new design, it reads off that normal template, and everything that you set is there. So that's how you make a custom template. It's very, very cool. It's a very neat feature to have, to be able to set up your own colors, to be able to, I mean, you can, I'll show you that real quick. Click on this button down here, which is your color palette editor, and it allows you to enter in all these thread charts that are here any color sequence in those thread charts. So here I use Robus and Anton. So I can just set up my colors as I wanted, however I want. I mean, I'm just picking colors, so you can set up color. And it doesn't matter what order these colors are in. These are not needle numbers. These are just colors, arbitrary colors. So you can have, you know, red, white, black, navy blue, natural white, goldenrod, yellow, whatever you want. Set up whatever colors you want in here. Save that as your template. So those same colors will pop up every time. So that's kind of neat. Now you can have different templates. So you can have a template for polyester thread, a template for gosh, you know, any different permutation you want. So you want a template for dark garments, template for light garments. You can have all that set up. You know, it's the sky's the limit for that. And you can choose, yes, you can choose whatever thread color you want and thread palette you want. So in this case, I chose Robus and Anton. So we have Madeira, where is it? Polyneon. So you can choose Madeira Polyneon instead. Yeah, so there, all these different thread palettes are in here. I'm sorry, let me read through this question real quick. Is there a shortcut method to create an embroidery disk file to take over to your machine? 2.0 had an icon on the screen where you didn't need to go to the file drop-down menu. Well, there's the save command, save as, but I think what you're you know, I'm thinking about your question, and I'm thinking, yeah, if you want to save it to embroidery disk, you do still have to go file. Whoops, cancel that. Still have to go file embroidery disk, wherever the heck it is. There it is. It's been so long since I've written an embroidery disk. Newer computers now don't come with floppy disk drives, so you have to use an external disk drive. And even those, Windows 7 and newer, they don't like external disk drives anymore. For some reason, I've burned through 2 of them. So I don't even write disks anymore. I email. And or most embroidery machines now will take compact flash cards or USB drives. So you know, so I can't even tell you the last time I personally wrote an embroidery disc. So I'm sorry. So you know, I apologize for sitting there going duh for a second there, because I need to remember how to do that. But no, there's no icon anymore for embroidery disc. Now that I'm thinking about it, you just have to, you know, hit the save or save as or embroidery disc. So unfortunately, no, there isn't an easy shortcut anymore. So now, Teresa, if you set up your colors like that, and you hit File, Save As, and save it as a template, it does not save that to the template file, because I believe that's the way it worked. And yes, you can set a thread chart, Joseph, so that it is always available, just the way I described, so that so let's say you pick these colors. You know what? And let's just try this real quick. While I have these colors chosen, we're going to see if I'm not blowing smoke out of everybody's you-know-what's-its. So let's just save this as a template file, and I'm going to save this as a test template point. Now I'm just going to close this. We're going to File, New from Template. Template is going to be test. I don't want to use auto fabric. Okay. And my colors are in there as chosen. So you do have to choose colors and put them in this color bar before you actually save it as a template. You can't just have a color chart up there but not have anything assigned. I think that may be the difference there. So so there we go. And that's how you set up a thread chart like that, always available. Okay, cool. Before we move on, any other questions? Cool. Great questions so far. So keep them coming if there's anything that you need more help with. So for those of you who are brand new to this, I think I just went over your head by a large margin. So I apologize for that. I'm going to start with a general overview of everything you see here, because there are a lot of buttons, a lot of colors, a lot of like, holy cow, what did I get myself into? But really, it's very easy. First bar that you see up here, these are all our toolbars that we can, if I right-click up here on a blank spot, you can see all these toolbars, that ones that are checked or what are visible. So I like to have a lot that's on my screen so I can easily, it's more efficient for me the way I digitize to just select it and from the button bar rather than going through a drop down. So sort of like the embroidery disc icon that had disappeared, but I'm sure there's a reason why that is no longer here. So if you wanted any of these other toolbars that are not checked up there, you just check them and they'll appear. So I have a lot that's up here. I like to have a lot that's available because it's just more efficient. So this button, first button here, obviously your menu bar up here is just the same as in any Windows program: File, Edit, View, blah blah blah. So this will switch us between CorelDRAW Graphics and EmbroideryStudio digitizing. Convert, which works with the graphics side. Show True View, show stitches, show outlines, show needle penetrations, show connectors, show repeats, show and hide your drawing files, vectors or bitmaps, hoops, product, applique fabric, grid, rulers. Here's a cool one: switch between metric and US measurements on the fly. There really are, a lot of people are firmly entrenched in inches. A lot of people are firmly entrenched in the metric system. I flip back and forth. I have customers that send me designs to digitize. They want it in inches, and then there's people that want it, that gives me, okay, just make this, left chest size. I prefer to work in the metric system because it's more accurate. It's a base 10, so you have 10 millimeters per centimeter. Very easy to figure out what 3 millimeters are as compared to, say, 3/32 of an inch. So I just stay in the metric system. Slow redraw, all these things will come in handy at one point or another. I'm not going to go through every one of them. I'm just going to go through the basic ones. So like this is new design, open, save, print preview, import embroidery design, import a drawing. You could also do that in CorelDRAW, at least for the drawing part. Zoom factor, object properties, which you'll also find right here. There's like your stitch type. So, and I have all the bells and whistles on here. So this is going to be a little bit more complex than maybe some of you guys have too. So that that's satin, fill, zigzag, e-stitch. This is a program split. This is motif fill. This is contour fill. Cross stitch. You can do cross stitch in here. The stipple fills, auto underlay, pull compensation, all the different settings that you have here, whether you want user-defined split, accordion spacing, so you get a gradation in there. So many different options here, the fun stuff to play with. On the left side here, we have our object select tool. This is like in Illustrator or CorelDRAW, you have your toolbar on the left-hand side. So pretty much the same stuff. Input methods, whether you want complex fill, fusion fill, A, B, or C input method for satin stitches, run stitch, manual stitch, lettering, team names, lots of fun with team names, drawing tools. I put my travel toolbar down here when I don't use my keyboard. One thing, most everything has if you look under here, you'll see on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, you'll see the letters. Those are keyboard shortcut keys. So the ones that you use more often, you will remember, and it makes your digitizing much more efficient. So make use of the keyboard shortcuts whenever you can. So I'm just going to go ahead and start digitizing something. I'm going to, excuse me, switch over to CorelDRAW Graphics. We're going to import a file, and I'll show you how to set up a design when we get here someday, when it switches. Here, we're thinking? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is now CorelDRAW. So this is the full CorelDRAW program. In this case, it's X6. You also have the program installed separately, so you can run them side by side if you wish. The only downside is that they are both memory hogs. So if you don't have a lot of RAM, just run one at a time. So I think I've got 8 gigabytes of RAM in this computer, which still sometimes isn't enough. So so just keep that in mind, that Wilcom is a memory hog, and so is CorelDRAW. So ignore running side by side if you can. So I'm just going to go ahead and import a drawing here. I already have some stuff ready to go here, so I'm just going to use the Wilcom ATC logo. So it's in here, and I hit enter to make sure it's there. It places it on the board, on your art board, your paper design field. Switch back. So now this is a JPEG file, which works out great because I'm showing you how to hand digitize stuff first. So the size, if we look down on the bottom here, we have our width is 91 millimeters square for all intents and purposes. So that's roughly 3.5 inches, which is fine. This will work for our needs. So the one thing I always do is I lock the design or lock the artwork so that I don't accidentally move this, because you definitely don't want your embroidery all over the place. And so by locking that down, it keeps that from moving around if you accidentally select it. So when you digitize something, the first thing you want to do is you want to think background to foreground, what's going to show first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. So you have to think of efficiency. What's going to be the most efficient way to digitize this design? A lot of people would automatically start with the text because that's simple. It's easy to do. But yet, if you're sewing on the outside here, the middle, if there's nothing there, it may tend to push and get a little bubble going right here. So you always want to start with whatever's in the center first and work your way outwards. That makes sure that you are smoothing out the fabric as you're going, and it also makes sure that you don't have any ripples or other bubbles or something going on. So that's a little thing about pathing. Let's talk a little bit about what are we going to sew this on. So we have a couple tools to help us with that. One being our template, initial template that we set up. If you remember seeing the object properties, when I pop that open, I have my satin spacing set at 72. My tatami is set at, tatami is set at 0.4. That's just the default that is set in here. But I also have something in here called styles, which is this little button bar right here. So if I go in, let's see, bear with me, if I go under setup, and I think it's, where is it, manage styles. So there are preset styles that are in here, all these presets, and then I have two that I've set up, PK and twill wovens. Now, the template is, I look at the template as the rabbit ears on an old antenna. There I go, dating myself again. And then the styles are kind of like the fine-tuning knob on the TV. Please tell me you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I'm going to feel really, really old. So the template is meant to set up the broadest parameters, and then your styles just kind of set up the finer stuff. So if I close this, and you can set up as many as you want. You can have 10 being your favorites and shown on the field, on the toolbar. So what I've done is I've set up one for PK and one for twill. So I'm just going to say we're going to sew this on a twill jacket. So I'm going to choose my twill. Now what that does now, that sets up my satin stitch at 90%. My tatami is at 4.4. All my parameters set the way I want it to. It sets up my initial underlays as well as edge runs. So all I can do is start start embroidering. Because otherwise, you have to go in here, it's digitizing, excuse me. Otherwise, you have to go in here and set all these yourself. That takes time. If you set up a style, it's already set up for you, and you just click one button and go. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to start with the red circle because that's in the background. So I'm going to do that as a, not a fusion fill, but as a complex fill with tatami. That's already selected. So we're going to go ahead and start digitizing. Now when you digitize, it's left mouse button is a straight point, right mouse button is a curve point. So I'm digitizing all right mouse button points there, except for the last one. Hit enter, and you'll see on the bottom here it says enter point 1 and boundary 2. That's our prompt bar down here. So it's asking me, do I want another boundary within the one that I just digitized? So you digitize the outside boundary first. In this case, I want to have a hole for this W. So yes, I do want to keep this open because the other big point is keeping my thickness of the embroidery that I'm creating as thin as possible. So you don't want a full fill underneath this W because it's a pretty big area of stitching itself. So then if there is something else going on top of that W, then that's 3 layers of embroidery there, which is too thick. So you want to keep it to either 1 or at most 2 with overlap. So there, hit enter. I finished that shape. Now it's asking me point 1 on boundary 3. Well, I don't have another boundary, so I'm going to hit enter again. Enter angle point 1. So I just want to have this at a kind of a diagonal angle, and it creates my stitching. Now I didn't pick a color first, so it just had the first color there. So I'm just going to change that to red. The color is arbitrary. I'm going to turn that off for a second. Color is arbitrary, doesn't matter, but unless you want to assign specific colors to this. And then that becomes more important. I tend not to assign colors because when I digitize for customers, I have no idea what thread they use. I don't know what colors they're going to use unless they tell me. So I just keep them arbitrary and let them worry about it on their end. But if you're doing your own digitizing for your own embroidery, then you can be much more persnickety about it. Excuse me. Now the one thing you'll notice that see a little circle, that's where our design starts, and this is where it's ending, where the plus sign is, and I don't like that, so I'm going to change that. And it did this automatically. I didn't tell it to do this. So I want it to start down here and sew up, so that the stitching should go all the way up. Now I haven't added any underlay. It just has default underlay underneath here. So now I'm going to do that. And my underlay, I'm going to have it be an edge run of 3 millimeters, a little bit more of a margin there. Now, and I tend to use the backstitch, the squared off backstitch, because it gives a nice edge, and it's a lot of it you want it to look pretty too. Now I put an edge run down first. It's just a quick once around, does 2 things. It starts the stabilizing, and it starts adhering the top fabric to your backing, which will eliminate a little bit of pushing. It doesn't have to be a very short stitch or a very long stitch, but something so that, and our margin, so you don't want it to push outside. One thing I didn't do is I didn't set our pull compensation, which 0.25 is good to start with for 12. So now that's the fill part there. Now the W, which we're also going to do as a fill, we're going to change our color to white, and we'll do the W. And real quick, all straight points. And we're going to do this straight across. Same thing, except I'm going to make our fill stitch longer. And a lot of what I do there, and I make that a little heavier because it's white thread. Remember, white thread, one thing to keep in mind, black thread and white thread being your extremes are black is overdyed, so it's thicker. White is over-bleached, so it's thinner. So you have to make your white thread, anything that you know is going to be sewn on white thread, you have to make it just a skosh heavier because that thread is thinner. Black thread, you can make it just a hair lighter in density because it's black thread. So 2 things that's to keep in mind. Now the other thing you noticed I did is I made my underlay a little heavier, and I changed the angle of that. if couple things about when you're digitizing, you need to keep in mind the way things are pushing and the way things are being stabilized. So if you notice, this embroidery there for the circle is sewing in this direction, but it's sewing this way. So it's pushing this way as it's embroidering. This going straight across is pushing this way. So um, your underlay really should be, and I didn't change this, this should be perpendicular to the top stitching in a complex fill. That gives you the most power stabilizing. Does that make sense to everybody? We're cool with that? So that gives us the most stability. So even though these two are sewing in almost similar direction, it's kind of nice to see that they are you've got underlay underneath that that's going in the opposite direction, so it should stay fairly stable. So we don't have to add an outline to contain everything. Um, one thing I would do slightly differently if I was doing this in the real world is I would move this in just a little bit, and I'd move this in just a little bit. No, that's too much. Because that will help, because the thing is going to push, and when it pushes this way and pushes this way as it's sewing, it's going to push out of circular. Maybe not so much on a twill jacket, but it could still happen. So you always distort just a little bit to make sure that you're not you're going to come out to pretty close to a perfect circle when you're done. Perfect shapes are the hardest. Perfect squares, perfect circles, because of all the pushing and shoving going on when you're embroidering something. So always, that's something else to keep in mind. How much we do that is all based on experience and, sewing something out and seeing what it looks like. So now we've done the center part. Now we can get into our text. I'm going to show you real quick how to do an input A, input B, and input C. Let's start with the word center. Now, one thing that this computer always has now, this system, is in our setup, you'll notice that we have a closest point join. So watch what happens when I start. I'll just change my color real quick. Start with a satin stitch on the C, and this is input A. So what it does is it gives you a column. You have to decide what side 1 and side 2 are, and you're doing opposing points on side 1 and then side 2. Now, these lines that are in between each of your points, you're setting up kind of like what do they call this, the rubber band. You're setting up, these are your stitch angles. You'll notice also that I cut off each end slightly to compensate for the pushing as this thing sews. So when I'm done, I just hit the Enter key and it generates. Notice what it did with the W. It moved our endpoint from all the way up here down to here so that it could closest point join. Is that the smartest thing to do? In a tatami, it really doesn't matter. In a satin stitch, you might see a little gap there from the tie-off. So in a tatami, it's not as big a deal. But you do have to keep in mind efficiency when sewing as well. So you may want to, it may not do that in the spot that you really want it to happen at, so you can move that again just by selecting it and moving that plus sign. So I'll just move it back up there for the time being. So now again, as we're digitizing, because we have that closest point join button connected, I can start here, run out to there, and it's going to automatically change where my endpoint is. If you'll notice, my start point is here, but my endpoint, instead of being down here where I actually ended, it moved it up here. I didn't mean to do that. So the good thing about that is that it's noticing where the closest point is. The bad thing is in a smaller letter, we're going to have a lot more running around going under here. So let's look at that real quick. So it ties in, starts there, does my underlay, comes all the way back, and then comes all the way back down to start my satin stitch. So that is in a smaller letter, that's going to be a lot of running around going on under there. So you have to keep that in mind. So now I'm just going to go ahead and digitize the E. And again, input A, and I square off my corner to give me a better corner. I'm getting into a little bit of digitizing theory here, but let me show you what happens if we digitize it the way you would think to digitize it, which is like this. what happens is, as this stitch turns to make the corner, it's becoming, this stitch is shorter than this stitch here. This is a longer stitch. So when you actually sew this out, these corners here are going to be look really thick and bunchy. So by adding a couple extra stitch angles in here and squaring off these corners, what we're actually doing is forcing some short stitching to happen, as you can see right there, but it keeps these stitches at a very similar length all through that corner. So it makes that corner look much smoother and much less bunchy and thick. The other thing you might want to keep in mind is moving these and these out just slightly. Because what happens is when you have an open end like this, I have another half hour. When you have an open end like this, what happens is, because this is connected here, this tends to push out, and these tend to actually look like they're sewing inward and bowing in a little bit. So that's something else to keep in mind. Lots to remember when you're digitizing, isn't there? Everybody follow me so far? Cool. Ignore the phone. Okay, so now let's move to input B. That's the center one here. So input B, it's telling you enter point 1 on side 1, enter point 2 on side 1. So this is giving you one side, then you hit the space bar, and then the other side. Enter. So the stitch angle is determined by the first set of points and the last set of points. Great, not so great for lettering, but great if we're doing a shape that is like this, and you've got a wave, and you've got the one side is straight, space bar, and then we're doing something like this. That would be a bear to digitize input A, but look how fast that was for input B. So now input C is the next one, and this gives us a single width column. And I'm just going to go around the outline of the W real quick here. It's one digitized line, and now it's asking us for the width. After you hit enter, it asks for the width, and it gives us the width. Now, the beauty of this is, if we double-click on that, move that over there. So we have our choice of that's the width that I digitized, 1.34 millimeters. We can have it centered, or we can have it 100% or any angle. Oops, have to have that selected first, Terry. So now that's all to the inside of that W. Yeah, it's if I still kept the fill like that, that would push all over the place, and it would look like a crapola when we sewed it. But you see the versatility of being able to do that, being able to put a simple border on something. Notice also these corners are all mitered. This little symbol right here is telling us it's going to miter corners. Now I could also select that and cap those corners instead and turn off the mitering. So what it did is it capped this corner, but these two weren't tight corner enough for it to make that. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So another cool feature of this, if I didn't want to hand digitize that, select the W and turn off TrueView real quick. So select the W, hit this button right here, outlines and offsets. That gives us a couple of outlines that we can choose from, whatever color we wanted. Just keep it white. 3 methods, one where it has the top shape takes precedence, one where it welds the shapes together, one where it puts, this is where the top shape takes precedence. This one, it puts underlay outlines underneath everything, but we just want the middle one. Hit OK, and it puts an outline on there for us. Kind of cool. So we don't have to think about it anymore. One of the most powerful features of the program, aside from the fact that you have full control over all the stitching, is the keyboard lettering. So I'm going to do Wilcom as keyboard lettering. So I'm going to right-click on the A button over here, which is going to bring up our object properties for lettering. So I'm just going to type in Wilcom in all caps. I'm going to choose a font. That's pretty darn close to Helvetica, so that's the one I'm going to use. And look at all the fonts that we have in the system. These come automatically. Anything that's got the zigzag symbol in there is a keyboard lettering font, pre-digitized font. If you keep scrolling down, you've got all these TrueType fonts that are in your computer. I have a lot because I have Illustrator. CorelDRAW brings its own. So there are a lot of TrueType fonts that are in here that you can use too. Just keep in mind that not every font is going to translate and automatically convert cleanly. That's definitely something to keep in mind. Lettering, when you're digitizing, 90% of every design that you digitize is going to have lettering in it. And if it doesn't look right, that's the first thing someone is going to point out. And I'll show you an example of that in a little bit here. Wow, time's just flying. So I'm just going to use Helvetica for this at 10 millimeter letter, fine, centered. Where's my, oh, here's my baseline. Choose a baseline. In this case, it's arced, so I'm going to choose the arc. I could also choose a free shape, but this is quicker. So letter spacing, word spacing, all that's fine. Let me go through that, what these are real quick. Letter height, pretty straightforward. Letter width, again, very straightforward. If I want it italicized or not. Baseline, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You have free line, fixed line. Free line, you digitize one point and it just puts the lettering in there no matter how much space it takes. Fixed line, you digitize a start point and an end point and it squeezes the lettering in there based on your height and width. Clockwise arc, which is what we have right here. Counterclockwise arc, if I was doing authorized training, center, I would do it as a counterclockwise arch. Have circles, so you can have it above and below the circle as well. Any shape, so you'd literally digitize the shape and it puts it on there. Fixed line and free line vertical, and then predefined, which I have never ever used. I think that you would use that if you have a line that's already there and you want to fit the text to that curve. I've never used it because I always have my drawing on the screen, so I use one of these. Oh, excuse me. So I'm choosing arc clockwise. Letter spacing, 10% of letter height is standard. Word spacing, I only have one word, so I'm not going to worry about that. Whoops. Getting scroll happy now too. Get back here. And then sequence is if I want it left to right, right to left, center out. If I was doing a hat, in this case, I'm just doing left to right for the sake of experiment. So now when I'm ready to go, I have to come up here and click Create Text. So it's telling me enter start point of arc, so which is here, end point of the arc, which is here, and a spot in the arc. So a point which dictates how severe the arc is going to be, which I'm going to do it right there. And why did it give me my lettering upside down? Oh, because I chose arc counterclockwise. Silly me. Let's just start over again, shall we? Oh my goodness. See, I'm getting click happy. Boink, boink, boink. There we go. Sometimes I swear. So notice I'm changing my letter height now because I just want to make it fit better. So also the lettering is not exactly in the right spot, is it? So now I'm going to reshape this text using, I hit H on my keyboard. Conversely, I could have hit the reshape edit tool there, reshape object, and I'm just going to click on the node in the middle of each letter and move it. Now this lettering is thicker than what I have on my screen, so then I'm going to go ahead in my object properties. My fill is at 90%, which is fine because this is going on a twill, but I want this to be thicker. Now I can use pull compensation, but that's only going to affect the top stitching. I don't have any underlay right now, but when I do have underlay, I might want that to follow with the thickness of this column, so I'm going to use column width. That's a little much, don't you think? So let's go 0.2. That makes it a little bit thicker and fills that space out. Now I'm going to add some underlay, and I'm going to use an edge run, and all that looks fine. So, and there's my lettering. I didn't have to do much. Now let's say, notice that this is up above the letter and down below the letter. The O does it, but not quite as much. Because what happens is as this lettering is sewing, this is pushing up, this is pushing up, that's pushing down, this is pushing up and down. But this, what this is doing, this is going to sew and sink into the fabric. So we need to compensate for that somehow. So I can either cut these off or I can exaggerate my curves. In this case, when this font was created, they exaggerated the curves. This one should have been exaggerated more, which we can now do, funny enough, by just clicking on the excuse me by clicking on the outline of the object. Now we can just select those nodes and pull this down just a little bit and pull that up just a little bit so that the letter still looks the way it's supposed to. There. And there's keyboard lettering. And now I can do that with any one of these letters. If I wanted to extend this out just a little bit, I can do the exact same thing. I can just select those nodes and pull that out. So you have a lot of control over what's going on. Now notice that it's trimming. Oops, gosh, click happy. Notice it's trimming between each one of these. I can adjust that if I wanted to. So in my object properties, I go to connectors. And in this case, because it's keyboard lettering, we're going to adjust inside the object. And I'm moving across this fast because it's this is very there's a lot to cover. So there's a lot going on. Everybody following so far? We're all cool? Okay. So so connectors inside the object. This is keyboard lettering, one object, so inside the object. So next connector is longer than 2 millimeters. It's going to trim. Now 2 millimeters is kind of a standard. Some people like to make that 1.5 millimeters. Some people, the default in the program, I believe, is 6 millimeters, which is way too long. So I like to keep it at 2 millimeters. Tie-in, in this case, is off. I want to change that. I want to make sure it ties in after a trim, because you want to make sure you connect that, you grab that bobbin thread as you're sewing. And previous connector longer than 2 millimeters. So in case it's a long jump, because I'm going to hand trim it, I still want it to tie in. Stitch length of 1 and number of tie-ins is 2 is fine, because what happens is you have, if you have this any longer, it's too long to grab the bobbin and start sewing, and then it may actually loop and show outside of your satin stitch. Any shorter, and it may just cause a knot, and again, be super visible. So about 1 millimeter to maybe 1.2 millimeters is acceptable. Now 0.2 millimeters, 0.2 of a millimeter, may sound like a very small amount, but as we see in the Olympics, 0.2 of a second is that's a lot of time. So 0.2 of a millimeter in embroidery is a lot of distance to travel, especially when you're talking, you're talking whether something is visible or not, and you don't want it to be visible. So those are the other thing we have to adjust is our tie off. Make sure that we don't want to always tie off the last object, because that doesn't have to. If it's going to trim, it's going to tie off anyway, right? Whoops, disappeared. So now, again, before trim color change, next connector longer than 2 millimeters, and I prefer the tatami method because this method tends to leave a big hole where it just tends to be more visible in a satin stitch, whereas if I choose the tatami method, it tends to hide itself better, and I like to keep this at about 0.5 millimeter. The short stitch filter that gets run every time you save a file is the default is at 0.3 of a millimeter. So at a tie off of 0.5 of a millimeter, you should be okay. So just to keep that in mind. There's our lettering. and that's how we easily do keyboard lettering. It sounded more complex than it really was, but you know, there's stuff to keep in mind as you're doing this. So now let's talk, as we're running on 15 minutes left of time here. Are we cool? Is everybody following everything okay? Any questions? Is there anything that I haven't covered yet that someone may want a question asked, answered? No? Whoops. I see a hand raise up. Did you have a question? Yeah, if you have a question, just throw it in the question panel, and I'd be happy to answer your question. Let's talk a little bit about automatic digitizing, because that's another thing that everybody wants to do when they get this program. That's what most of this stuff is sold on, and so let's get into that, shall we? Let's get back to CorelDRAW Graphics, and I'll import this lovely little thing here. Hit enter. Now, whoops, I have a question here. How do I make it trim between letters? I cannot turn it on or off. So between letters in a keyboard lettering font is just like I showed you. If you weren't watching, then it's you just do your connectors inside the object. So let me go back to WorldCom decoration real quick here, and I'll show you. In your object properties, under connectors, you have the ability to change connectors inside or after the object. So for keyboard lettering, it's inside object, and that allows you to trim in between those letters. Anything else, if it's hand digitizing, it's all after object. So I hope I answered that question for you. Hold on a second. Another question here. I have to create a double running line, kind of looks like barbed wire intertwined. That's something that sounds like you're going to have to hand digitize. If it's what I think it looks like, barbed wire, there's nothing automatic with that. It's all that's all hand digitized. Now there is a cool tool that we have here. If you don't mind me going off on a tangent real quick, called the freehand embroidery tool, which allows you to simply draw on your screen, and it creates a running stitch line. So I can do whatever I want. I can draw silly faces. I can scribble. And that's a running stitch line. So it's kind of neat. Great when you're doing natural things like, you know, animals. Dogs are a big one that I did at one point. Believe it or not, a lot of deer and elk. For some reason, people like deer and elk in their embroidery designs. But that allows you, if you can create that, and maybe that creates that barbed wire look that you're looking for, depending on what that is. So, oops, come on. So there you go. There's one way to do it. Otherwise, you can use just a regular running stitch line and just create that. Maybe it's like that, kind of like baseball stitching. But anyway, there's how you would do that. Okay, so let's go back to these automatic digitizing. So first thing you'll notice is that this is kind of pixelated. Now I would prefer to hand digitize this myself, but if you're just getting started, auto-digitizing is quick. Not necessarily the most efficient thing to do, and I'll show you why. But we're going to trace this first as a logo. So just to kind of solidify our colors, we're then going to merge these colors together so that we get 6 colors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, instead of 8 or 9 how we had. So now the only thing that I don't like is I don't like the way the text, see, it still has white in the middle there, but we need white for the eyes, so we can't get rid of that color. So we're just going to click OK here, and if you'll notice, we still have our JPEG here. So we have our vector, we have our JPEG. So if we go back to the decoration, we can hide the bitmap and just have the vector. Now this, I would end up just using keyboard lettering for, just like we did before. This, on the other hand, because we have Embroidery Studio, we can do a couple different things. We can use our automatic digitizing tools. So if you look in here, we can, like this, we're going to do tatami fill without holes. So we're going to make that one that. This is going to be a satin stitch. So let's pick, now we can pull this out so it stays there. So satin stitch, doink. This is going to be a tatami with holes, doink. Notice the colors are all the same though. So let's go ahead and change that. So we want that to be that color. Oops. That should be that color. Thank you very much. That and that to be that color. Now the tongue is red, so let's make that red. Boink. And blue for these guys. Oops, and we forgot that for that. So now our sequence is off, and we haven't even done the outline yet. So we haven't even worked on underlay or densities or anything yet on this. But that's a quick way to automatically digitize, semi-automatically digitize, and get the shapes filled. I'm sorry, I have a question real quick here. Is there a reason I don't have those tools? Yes, you may not have you may not have purchased that option for the auto-digitizing, which is not, that's fine. I can show you how to do this automatically, just converting the files. So let me select those colors. Get rid of that. We'll go back to CorelDRAW Graphics. We'll select this, and now we just hit convert. What it does now, it will automatically convert these stitches to embroidery, which you should be able to do because you have CorelDRAW. The only thing I don't like the way it did it is the text, because if I put it in TrueView, look what it did. The B is flat. It digitized. It created stitching for all the white areas. The T's are different. That they're both done incorrectly. The A is done incorrectly. Look at the way that corner's there. The E, whoops. The E, I don't like that corner. I don't like the way it does that. The R is done flat. So this is definitely a case. Oh, that serif is horrible. I apologize. I just subject you guys to this travesty of embroidery. So let's delete that crap, and we'll end up doing keyboard lettering at a later date. So since we had the computer automatically create these shapes, now we can just go in and add our stitching. And Kyle, you do have the ability to convert from CorelDRAW Graphics, so you can do that. With all the bells and whistles of level 3 of Embroidery Studio, you have some versatility. Now, say for instance that, notice it didn't, when we traced, it got rid of this part of the handle that came straight across like the others. So we can actually draw that in here so that we can then follow that and just stitch edit. Come on, get up there. There we go. And we can just make that happen for ourselves. Enter. Oh, come on. You're supposed to automatically create those shapes for me because, oh, it's because I was changing. See, folks, this is what happens when you're digitizing on the fly. So notice I had picked the wrong shape. And also notice it left a gap here too. So let's fix that too, shall we? Let's zoom out just a little bit. We'll just select those two nodes and pull that up so it closes that gap up. So there you go. You have lots of control over how this whole thing, oh, it put the blue on top. So again, we need to go in and adjust our sequence of how these colors sew. Yeah, because look, it doesn't even sew the hat in the same sequence, and it sews the blue and the red on top. So let's adjust that. And I believe everybody should have the sequence tools. So if we click select all, and we hit sequence by color. So we want the hat to sew first, then the barrel of the bat, or no, let's do the eyes first, then the barrel of the bat, then we can sew the handle, and then we'll keep the tongue on top, but then we'll sew the outline and then the tongue. Okay, so it automatically adjusted that for us. And you can see that the black is now on top there, and the black's on top of the eyes and all that. Okay, so now we go in here and we can adjust our stitch angles so that looks more like it's sewing on the hat. The only thing, or on the hat, on the bat. The only thing it doesn't do here is you notice there's no overlap anywhere. Even in the eyes, there's no overlap there. There's no overlap here. We're going to want to fix that. So we're going to want to edit this shape and pull what's underneath out so that it's underneath the outline. Even if we have to close up some, get rid of that gap that was there. That enables the embroidery, when it finally gets embroidered on fabric, it won't gap, and you won't see a big difference between the fill. You won't see a fabric showing through the fill and the outline. We haven't added underlay yet or adjusted our density. We've just created stitching. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add some underlay under this. So the hat is going to be a tatami. That's fine. Underlay, let's give that an edge run and a tatami. Let's give the bat a tatami. And again, I like to use that middle return. So that looks a little bit better. That's just a sentence. That's a sentence. So that all looks good. This isn't optimal. If I was going to hand digitize this, I would do it differently. But as far as the automatic stitching goes, I think that looks decent. I would probably tend to go in here and clean up some of the handle a little bit more. Change that angle so that that looks a little bit cleaner. Change the angles in the handle so that looks cleaner. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the automatic embroidery, automatic digitizing. So we're down to our last couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions of anything that we've covered today? There's so much more to cover. I really, we've barely scratched the surface on what this program can do. So I do recommend you guys take the other classes that are coming up for about EmbroideryStudio, about using vector files and how to create vector files. I do teach more. I am one of Wilcom's authorized training centers. I'm happy to help you in your future training needs if you need to. If I'm not anywhere that's convenient for you, contact Wilcom, and they have a list of other authorized training centers. Real quick question: how do you keep your workspace layout as your default? There are a couple of ways to do that. One, you can save it in the template file. That doesn't always work, though. There are other things that can affect how the layout changes. Like, for instance, Windows hiccups, which could really happen. So really, 9 times out of 10, if you set the layout on screen on your workspace the way you want it to be, it should stay that way. It just does that automatically. It doesn't really answer your question, but really that's really the only way. Just set it the way you want it, save it as a template, and that should save it. Can I put a tear under the eye? Well, of course I can, my dear. Let's zoom in real quick first, and let's pick a color. Oh, this lovely green color under Input A, and we're going to just digitize a tear. Now, it's supposed to be a teardrop shape, but it's more of an oval. But you can add layers on top of this. The only thing you got to be careful for is if there's something underneath the bat. Right now we just have 2 layers, but if there's something underneath there, then that's 3 layers, and that might be too much stitching. That might get very thick in that area. You will have to back off on your density a little bit. That's 90, so maybe make that a 95, and maybe change your underlay to a center run so that's a little bit less bulky. Jeff, the best way to resize an image, there are a couple ways to do it. You can, like, let's say if you want to resize the hat here, say this is our, well, actually, let's do this. Let me turn on our drawing back again. So maybe this isn't the right size we want it. This is 4 inches tall, including this white space. Well, we can either click this and drag it and resize it using the nodes, resize it down here. Those are the best two ways to do it, to be quite honest. You resize it with the nodes to the size that you want, and you could actually stretch it and skew it if you wanted to, or you just change it globally down here using the actual physical measurements, or by percentage. Those are the best ways. Any other questions? No questions? Cool. I'm going to stop the recording real quick.